Okay, so this is Mark's survey, Sitecore Experience. This video is really kind of a recap and a secondary look at the published item comparer speak modifications that we did for the Sitecore Milwaukee Sitecore User Group meeting on February 11th, 2016. So the core aspect of this presentation that was done is actually taking it's really about Speak and some overview of Speak, but taking a module from the Sitecore marketplace and applying Speak to that module. So Tim Braga was kind enough to allow me to hack away at his published item compare module that he has out in the marketplace. And I was really looking for something that, wasn't developed for a newer version of Sitecore, just to kind of do this proof of concept. And as you can see here, the requirements for this module are really 6.4, 6.4.1, and 6.5. So what we're going to do is actually take exactly the code base and the module and install it on Sitecore 8.1. And we're going to see how that works and what it looks like. Try to change the places where we want to do Speak. So here we go. So let me put in my super secret password here. And this is just a small 8.1 site that I put up just to demonstrate, this module and what happens when it's installed in 8.1. So, as you can see, and to save everyone the time and agony, I've already installed the module here. And here's actually the ribbon that is installed with the module. So, the module itself actually takes a look at the current item you're on. You'll see in the little box within the item compare that it does a validation and it lets you know, hey, you're cool, hey, you're not cool. There's a target database view and an item compare. What we're really going to focus on for the demo and the partial demo, because of just the sheer amount of time that this would take, and I don't want anybody falling asleep at some point in this video. So we're just going to only tackle a few things here. So as we bring up the item compare, for a 6.5 module, this is working actually rather well in 8. It doesn't look all that bad. There's some button issues here, and definitely, this is kind of taking on that 8 look and feel because of the overriding of basically those elements like section that are being used to build this grid, if you will. So what we're really going to focus on for the demo is really kind of a few parts here. The item information section up here is something that we want to recreate and definitely try to speakify. There's not going to be a lot of graphical Yahoo there, if you will, but we're definitely going to make it a component. We're definitely going to utilize it on a dialog page. A dialog itself. The validation you can see here, we're not getting any feedback for that. That's one of the things that I believe that we would have to kind of tweak a little bit. So we're actually going to get that going. We're going to use most of the code to be able to do that. And then we're going to take care of our buttons down here, our publish item button and our view target item button. If we kind of go through this, we can publish, and you can kind of see it highlights, and eventually, it publishes. So there's really no feedback allowing us to know that when it finished or when it didn't finish. So we're going to change the feedback just a little bit. We're just going to throw some alerts in there just to let it know stuff is going on. And the view target item will actually refresh the back end and then actually show us the web version of that. And so we're going to change that a little bit too. We're actually going to open it up in a new tab, and we're going to put a little dialogue. Actually, we're just going to open it up in a new tab and then let people know that, you'll see that it's there. We're going to change the size of this dialogue a little bit. So those are some of the cosmetic things we want to do, but from a look and feel standpoint, we want to keep this thing pretty much intact. So, at this point, the only other thing would be this target database. We're actually going to, give some feedback on this as well. It is working. It is actually doing what it says it's going to do. It's just not very evident, and that could be a lot to do with just basically 8.1 and bringing and porting that in. So I have not tried this on a 6.5. I have no idea how it would work on a 6.5. I'm assuming that, pretty much what we're seeing from a functionality. And like I said, functionally it's working. So we can utilize a lot of that code. So it's just a matter of now getting it kind of pretty and giving some customer dialogue feedback to be able to just kind of know that, that we've done something. So let's get started on carrying this over. So I did some pre-setup. Like I said, the amount of time that we have here doesn't even do justice to how long this would actually take to rewrite the whole thing. So like I said before, we're going to focus on basically the item information at the top of that dialog, the validations, and the actual buttons, the tooling buttons to publish your item and to view your target item. Everything else we'll kind of just go over and do kind of a code read and a code review. So, and we'll just focus on creating those parts so we kind of get the concepts down of what you would need to do to be able to create that dialogue and speak. So to get some context, I'm just going to go over what residue we're kind of putting in to use later on. So on my screen, you can see I have an item compare app within Speak. So this you would just create in Core, Sitecore Client. This is where your Speak apps typically live. Underneath your apps, I just created a new folder called Item Compare. And I broke this up into basically components and dialogues. Now, if I wanted to do some dashboard pages kind of on the back end, I could do that. For our scope here, it's really just about the dialogues and just really the components that are going to be utilized by the dialogue. So the item compare is actually the grid that you saw with the section titles in it in the scroll bar. So that is going to be its own component, and we'll walk through that code when it comes time. The item versions DB and publishing targets DB actually started out to be data sources. I had some issues with the combo box in getting that to listen for the event. So what I did is just kind of pulled that back a little bit, and I wrapped a solution here to get this moving in order to be able to pick up that on selected item or on selected value change to a combo box. So that is why those are there. There are combo boxes in Speak. And we also have a dialog. Now, we talked about the compare item in the toolbar, or in the ribbon, excuse me. And we have a target database item that was right below that compare item. And so this dialog that we see here is actually going to be for that. And here's the composition of that. And we're actually going to create the compare one going forward in a little bit. With that, let's go through the projects I've created. I just basically brought over some assemblies for reference. This isn't typically what I would recommend. For a demo, this works out perfectly fine. So we have basically a shell of a website that we're going to be doing most of the controls with and kind of tie that back into this instance of Sitecore, affectionately named Gordon Ramsay because I was hungry when I named it. So, yeah, it works for me. So we're going to keep here the configuration controllers. We're actually using the service API controller. And really, I believe Anders Laub has a great blog post on why to do that. Mike Robbins, I believe, also has some stuff on the entity service that kind of relates into that for Speak 2.0. Definitely review those things. This is really going to kind of bring these controller methods into the fold for Sitecore and utilize the pipelines that are existing versus trying to work around that and not having things like authentication checking and stuff like that. We're not dealing with authentication here, but just as a practice, wanted to go this route. And also we have an item compare routes that we'll be filling in. And so this is really going to be the routes for all the methods that we create in that controller so that we can access them through Speak and through JavaScript, the JavaScript controls scripts. So we can access those through the JavaScript related to the controls and to the page code. And then basically I created the structure. It's going to be the same structure of where we would keep our assets in the website. So Sitecore shell, client, applications. And we created a directory called item compare. You can see our components. I've also added this place where the CSS is located and script. So I currently created a shell of the page code script and brought in CSS because nobody wants me to or want to watch me, create CSS items. So we brought everything in here just to make it look pretty. The second project here of where they mention here is really a lot of the code has been ported over. And I moved some namespaces and I've done some different things, not for any reason, just because it's what I did. But you can see that we brought over, if you take a look at the source code on the marketplace, you'll see a lot of these things are very familiar. You know, the compare settings item was basically brought over. Publish target item, like I said, namespaces were changed, but everything else. We created a constants file to kind of keep some of the hard coding out a little bit. I didn't go through everything, but it's just a start. And then I created just a small utility class just to be able to do some of the things to kind of reduce the class count. So some of the things are coming over from the old code and putting them in here where they made sense. Our commands that we're using off of that ribbon have been brought over. And pretty much they've been brought over as they were. We will be opening up the dialog box via a shear response show modal dialog. And it's actually taken the URL string to what will be our dialog box. So that is a change there. But other than that, pretty much the code coming into these is exactly the same. The panel is doing the same validation it did before. It's actually the same exact thing. No code change outside of namespaces and dependencies. So the custom diff viewer, almost exactly the same thing. There is a new method that I just added on. This rendered the HTML, and it's still rendering the HTML, but we've actually, instead of using sections and which didn't really pan out from a standpoint of the opening and closing, the collapsing of those accordions, we did it a different way. Here's the section that potentially you could use a Sitecore Speak repeater and create a template and utilize that to do this. Did not do that here just for the sake of just keeping the demo kind of simple without having to do anything around maybe a control I haven't used before. So that will be a future demonstration, or maybe just a addendum note on how that works, maybe a quick little video. So other than that, the code beyond those changes is exactly the same. We brought over the dictionary and put it into the core as well, as we'll see in a little bit. So we have complete globalization on any labeling. And we'll actually show a little bit of that in Speak as well. So created just some classes essentially to mimic some models. Kind of carried these over. These are basically, this is for the parameters of the JavaScript calls. When we do the API calls, we really can't have multiple parameters per se, and that's more of a Microsoft thing. So this is really what we're passing to the controllers to be able to get done what we need to get done. So it's just a class representing an object. This is more or less just item information. You can see that those fields are very similar to what we saw in the dialog box. And the context is really something that carried along within the code that was brought over, namespace change. And we created a little processor for the item compare. This is pretty much almost, in fact, I think it is actually a direct port over from the old code. You can see we're using the context here. So far we've pretty much, I think we have a couple of new things, but we've been able to really just kind of pick up the code and put it back down. The validations, which weren't firing before, all the validators are here. We've pretty much, again, namespace change. Other than that, there's not a lot going on from a change standpoint. So I think we had to change a couple of little things in here. I don't even remember what I changed, to be quite honest, but they were insignificant to the overall code base. So what you see here is pretty much the original code base, maybe minus a tweak here or there to be able to get what we need to get from a 8.1 or a Sitecore API change. So with that, let's start kind of getting into some of the aspects around Speak. Okay, so what we'll cover at this point is really let's take a look at the config. One of the things that we need to do for Speak is to be able to identify where our stuff is. So we're going to add a little 3, 2, 1. We're going to add a little snippet. We're just going to keep part of this commented out. Oh, I went a little too far. So we need to add a resolve script. And what that's going to do for us is essentially tell Sitecore where to go get our item compare scripts in CSS and JS. So we're just going to take care of this routing thing for now. So now let's go ahead and create a couple of controllers and routes. Now we're going to be using these as we create the Speak component. So we're just going to get them out of the way now. So right now I have the Services API controller. We talked about it a little bit before. And the item compare. So we're just going to go ahead and insert a couple of snippets here. So this is our item information method. And this is what's going to pull back essentially the item information at the top of that dialog that we saw earlier. So this is pretty much the same exact code. All we did was really provide a model to be returned and a model essentially, or an object to be brought in as a parameter. But we're going after the database, we're getting the language, we're actually getting the item, we're making sure that the fields that we want populated on the other side are populated. And then we're turning a result as JSON. So we save that. We're going to save the config. We're going to go ahead and add the route. So all this is really doing is allowing Sitecore to know where to go for the past Sitecore API, item compare, get item information. It goes to what controller, and with the action that we just implemented. And like I said, with the Services API, we want to try to make sure that the signature is as small as possible. If it has more than one parameter, definitely you're going to have problems. So try to group everything from a parameter standpoint into your one object coming in as a parameter object. So at this point, we will go ahead and start creating our dialog. At this point, we want to create the view dialog. Obviously, we want to create our structures in here. We've already got this in. Like I said, I have some things stubbed out. We explained that earlier. So to create your dialog, go ahead and let's go do a new item and put in dialog. And you'll see a Speak dialog page. That's the template we're going to go with right now. And we're going to put in compare viewer and hit OK. And that will bring up our compare viewer. So right away, we're going to add a page setting item to this. Page setting is really what is going to be our kind of container for any definitions for the page, any controllers. We're just going to leave that page settings. We'll hit OK. And then right away, we'll add the style sheet. And this is pretty much a typical fashion of building the Speak components. We're going to do a page style sheet file. We'll call it item compare styles. And then since I've done this before, I'm going to be able to, just kind of select it. So what I'm really pointing at here is this file here, and I already have this over on Gordon Ramsay. The thing here, the symbiotic relationship, while I have the code over here, it's not really directly connected to here. So anything that I do in Speak, I need to have the assets over into the Sitecore instance. So I've already pre-moved this and pre-moved the item compare that we'll see next. So let me save this. Okay. And we will go ahead and begin to design the layout of this. So first thing we need is pick a layout. Since we're doing a dialog page, there are two real main options to Speak. The main options, you can see you have a few others, but really there's an empty layout and a layout. We're going to go for the layout here, but I'm not expecting anything to be pre-filled in with that. So it's up to us to really kind of build the page together. So we're going to go ahead, and the first thing we want to add is a page code module. And this is going to refer to that JavaScript that we were doing. Think of it as kind of the home base for the scripting model, where it's more of an application level type script, where you can have scripts on your components as well, as you'll see in a bit. So we're going to go ahead, and like I said, I already pre-moved that empty script. So we'll go ahead and just select that. So we're going to go to Gordon Ramsay. We're going to go to Sitecore Shell, Client, Applications, and Item Compare Scripts. And we'll take our page code. And I double clicked it, it came up. You can see it's basically just an empty script. We're defining the Sitecore library as SC. We're going to add to the definition. We're going to extend that application definition with our item compare dialog variable that's going to have all of our functionality at an app level here. So let me go ahead and save that. Okay, so let's go ahead and there's let's add a string dictionary, right? We want globalization for this. This is one of the features in Speak. So we're going to add a string dictionary, which is really allowing us to translate like we do with a dictionary. The string dictionary is a little bit different. We do have to set it up. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and put this in the page body. And then what we need to do is essentially set up globalization. So we're going to go ahead and create a definition for this. So we'll call this globalization. We're going to add an item. We're looking for the string dictionary parameters. Now the concepts here are going to be very similar to what you've seen. The only difference is we're doing a selection of a subset of values versus taking a whole dictionary and looking up through it. And I imagine part of that is we do not want to carry everything in a dictionary over, everything that we don't possibly need. You can do phrases in here, but what we're going to focus on are some predefined things that we have in here for item compare. And I left these in here as well for speed. So they're basically simple dictionary objects. We're going to do the created by, created date, item name is on our information, item path is on our information. And I'll kind of show you where these are being identified in the script to do the translate. And we want modified. And I think we just need template name. I think we are cooking with gas. So each of these, and we'll go to these real quick. It's the same exact setup as if you were using the content editor. Where basically you have a phrase, once it decides to show itself, you have a key and you have a phrase. So essentially we're picking out the keys, and we can we can actually attach different languages, do different things with versioning. So exactly like what you've been doing with your item versions and with item languages can be done here. And this is the preferred way to do that, so you can have globalization. There's also, you can do labels hard-coded, obviously, which we all know how that works out. And you can actually create, when you create text and labels, everything else on Speak, you can literally use the control and put what you want in there. But then again, it's not going to have this functionality of being able to translate. So we're going to go ahead and save all of that. And we'll go back to the layout. And then we're going to add the dialogue pieces. So let's look up dialogue. And we're actually going to put in the dialogue view rendering. That'll go into the page body. We're going to add a header and footer that's part of this. And these are all, basically these are aligning with the placeholders. The placeholders are obviously, preset, which makes the dialogue easier. We definitely want to try to keep things in the order they're rendered in this case, if we can. So at this point we have basically our layout, which has a page body. Within that page body, we have a dialogue rendering that has placeholders for header, footer, and content, which we'll be adding the content in a little bit. But right now, we're going to do a title. So at this point, there's one thing we did forget to do since we created that globalization template. Oops. We wanted to attach the globalization template, which I've already done off the camera, but we're going to do it again. So essentially we navigate to that parameter, we click it, and then I will have that information later on. We'll kind of display that in the script. So we've set our main dialogue placeholders and substructure. So now we're going to go ahead and add a title, the header title for the dialogue. So what we want to do, much like we did with globalization, we're going to create some definitions here. We're just going to call this text. You may want to give it a more descriptive name in the real world, but right now for us, it's text. And we'll add a new item. And we're going to, I can tell I was recording before and had to back up because I had the word but on there. All right, so we're going to put in some text parameters. Doing these parameters this way versus just kind of putting things directly into, I should rename that. Putting this directly into the controls themselves. If you put it directly into the controls, you don't have the capability of multiple versions, multiple languages. So we definitely want to do this as more of a best practice. And we should name things correctly in the other screen so we don't have to come back and do a rename. So we'll call this title definition. And we can actually define what our copy is going to be in here in the text type. So we definitely want this to be a title, right? It's going to be the title of the dialogue. And we can give it a tooltip, but let's just fill out the text for now. And this is going to be, I believe it was value, compare, oops. And I'm sure So we'll save that. And then we'll come back up and we're going to add the actual piece in the rendering. So this is something that's going to go into the dialog header. So I'm going to try to place myself down there. Let's do an add a rendering. And we will do just a basic text rendering. We'll grab that, we'll add it in. First thing we do is let's give it a descriptive ID so we know what it is later on when we're maintaining. And then like we did with the globalization, we're going to refer to the source. Okay. And then also we're going to want to do the same thing we need to be able to close the dialog box. Sitecore is automatically going to put in a minimize and a close control at the top as part of the dialog rendering routine. We're actually going to put a close button at the bottom. There's a space for it. So we'll actually create the definition for it quickly. Add a new item. And I didn't name it again, so we'll do a quick rename to compensate for my deficiencies in naming. So this is going to be a close button. And there's really three things that we have to worry about here. The type of button that we want, and we're going to make this a primary type of button where it actually has a blue background. It stands out a little bit more, and it's a primary action of the dialog. Quite honestly, the text we're going to have is a simple close, right? It kind of just says what it does, and then down here there's a click event. Right now, because we don't have our routine set up, we're just going to do an alert. We'll do a simple alert when we press the button. I'll go back to the layout and we'll actually add that button. And of course it loves to add it not where you want it. So we will go ahead and take care of that. Now this is going to end up in the dialog footer buttons. So there's a placeholder for it. And we're just going to call it the close button. And again, we could do a lot of stuff up here. We don't want to. We want to be able to version and be able to make that global. So we actually have to add a data source. Otherwise, that magic won't happen. And there we go. So we've added a button and we've added the text. There's actually a placeholder for the dialog header as well called title, which is where we want that to live. It's always a good idea to add a message bar. And we kind of want to do that before we put in the next page structure. This is something that if anything goes wrong with your Speak application, you can utilize this to display status messages, error messages, really anything you want. So right now we're just going to put that there, but we want to put it in the dialog content. We want that to kind of be the top piece so it kind of stands out. At the very top of the dialog box if something were to happen. This is going to be a more complex dialog box than normal, so we definitely want to utilize that if we can at some point. For our demo, we probably won't do it much. as we'll probably just flash up errors as they occur on Ajax calls. So we already kind of did the title text, but there was a opening paragraph as well, a subtitle of sorts. So we're going to quickly do another text parameter. And I'm actually going to name it this time. We're going to call it subtitle definition. And I'm just going to make this a larger label so it stands out. And then see if I can remember this text. Oh, look at that. I don't have to. It remembered it for me from all the times preparing for the demo. Yep, that looks good. So we will save that. And then we will add another text rendering. Actually, there is one thing I need to do before we add that text rendering. We actually need to split up our dialogue content a little bit. So we're going to use this dialogue content M structure. And this is going to give us basically a breakout to be able to do a main content. There are other substructures, and you find these in this business component library within the Sitecore structure, or you can go look in documentation. I found it's better to go look at the source. And you can kind of see what placeholders are in there from a structure that you may need. So we're choosing dialogue content M just because we just want that main content area. And now let's go ahead and add kind of a subtitle section. So we kind of want this thing to center up in the middle. So there's a thing called a border. And a border is basically a div tag. And we're going to bring that down to the bottom. And let's call this a subtitle section. And then normally we would do a definition for the border. We could do that. I'm doing something so simple here that I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm actually going to use that padding. I'm going to stick a little room at the bottom. And I definitely don't want to show the border on this. So I'm going to go ahead and do it here. There's nothing really I need to translate. So we're perfectly good. If I think I had text in there or something like that, I definitely would never want to do that. So I'm going to take advantage of kind of taking the shortcut and putting things right on the template, not right on the rendering. So let's go ahead and add that text. And we actually need to put this in our right spot. And you can see now that we have a dialogue content main, a context switch, a back, and action. So there's placeholders to be able to do particular functionality. What we really care about right now is just really the main. And then within that border, we're going to place this text. We're actually going to call this subtitle text. And we will choose the data source that we created for this. It helps if I put it in the right spot we want it to go to. So essentially, these placeholders are like the other placeholders. The controls are going to stack with inside of them. So as we add more and more to this, we'll go. But right now, we're at where we're at with the subtitles, and we'll look at actually getting to the meat of this process and actually looking at this thing in the next few steps here. Okay, so at this point, we want to now add this to the layout. So the final thing we need to do, we got our HTML in, we have our JavaScript all set for this component. We do have to add parameters to this component. And that's as easy as basically right-clicking on it. And this is really your data template. So oops. So I'm just going to create a single line text of outgoing in an information category section. And we're just going to store the value of it going out at that point, or we'll have it reserved to do that. Make it somewhat easy. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll save this. Let's go ahead and add it to the layout. All right. And as it typically does, it mocks me by moving it to the wrong place that I don't want it. And then we're going to put this in item left content. And we'll hit close. And now we'll do a build and deploy, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've built and I've actually moved the files. And the files that I actually moved, primarily most of the files are in the Sitecore shell client application. So we take them out of our project and we're going to move, we've actually moved the component for item information. You can see there's existing things out here. That is part of the project we haven't covered yet. And we also moved our script out here, the item compare page code. The other thing that we did do is actually move out the config file. So move that into include, and the Milwaukee Sitecore config. And that's not what I wanted. So we did activate the command so we could actually bring up the compare viewer. So, and then we just did the target database right away. So those were actually uncommented out, but that's the only difference prior to the build and the trial. So if we go out here, there's a couple of the changes we had to make from a fixed standpoint, and I'll go over that. So we moved out, oh, and also the DLLs. I apologize. So we actually need to move out the core and the web DLL that we created as well to the bin directory. So when we bring it up, you know, we actually get our item compare screen. So we could see that we didn't pass validation. We don't have validation active, so that's pretty valid at this point. We're not going to hit target database because we don't have anything behind that quite yet. But we'll hit the item compare window. And you can see it's a little bit different than it was before. You know, we got to do some spacing in here. But you can see our title has shown up. Our subtitle is there. We have the minimize close that's automatically added. We have our close dialog box at the bottom. And then we actually have item information based off that home item. So all of that came through. You can see the labels have gotten translated to English. And this information has made it. So we'll put in some buttons next. We'll put in the validation. And then we're just going to do a code read for the rest of everything else versus putting you through the pain of kind of creating all the definitions and kind of going through the whole build. So pretty much that is the gist of getting a custom control into Speak. You can see that we've taken what was done in the original publishing item compare and just basically created a control, created a controller and a couple of methods in a route, and essentially we got our information to display on the screen. So the couple of changes, a couple of bugs, you know, I had the slashes the wrong way. So I obviously have done this before based on the copy and in. So make sure that the slashes are the right way for your style sheet. We could not find the styles originally. And I actually did change the close button item definition, change the script to be the app close. So that is pretty much what was done from a change to fix any issues. So, and then obviously those are moved out. So we'll jump right into the buttons then. And for these buttons, these are the tool buttons. So we're going to add another couple of button definitions. So we're going to do the publish item. And just to get these to stick out a little bit more, we're going to make them primary buttons. And then we want the text to be publish item. And we're actually going to fill in the click, and we'll put the script in a little bit. And we already have that preset, so we're going to do the publish item. Oops. So we'll save that. And we'll add one more for view target. And again, when you forget to name it on that screen, feel free to come back and rename it here. So again, we'll make this one a primary style button. And then we have that. We're also going to do another text definition because remember it had a little tool subtitle aspect to it. So we'll create a text parameter template. Okay, so we have our definition set up. So now let's go back to the layout. And we're actually going to put these on the right side. So we're going to have this item information that we had, and these were stacked on top of one another. But we're going to put the buttons over to the right. So one thing we're going to do is add a border. And we want to do this because we kind of want the buttons to display a certain way. We'll kind of center those. And so now we'll add a couple of buttons. And we go and attach our definition to the data source. Oops. So typically when you want buttons to kind of go next to each other like we had on the other dialog, you definitely want to put them in a border to kind of contain them. So the border is like a div tag. So essentially you're going to put these two buttons in a div tag. That's what it really equates out to. And again, if we need to change the labels on the buttons, since we do have, viable text that needs to be globalized, we definitely want to create the definitions. Okay, so we'll save that. So the buttons will show up, but right now we got to have them actually do things. So we're definitely going to add some of that script code. Okay, so at this point, we're still getting our parameters. We're actually making a couple calls. I just did a reuse, and this is quick and sloppy. I'd recommend combining functionality into one thing so you don't have to make the two trips, but it's a demo. We're going to do what we do. So we're going to go get the target database that was set up originally as part of the module in the system modules item compare node item. And then we're going to go and actually publish this item through the controller method. And then we're just going to return basically alerts that it's happening. Then we're actually going to close the dialog once it publishes. So that's going to be our indication that it's done. Boom, I'm going to get out of here. Because you really should go back and now, look at it again since we've taken an action on it. So, and that's pretty much it for the script. So now we have to go in and get in our controller methods. So we'll just come down here. So there's our get target DB. Next will be our publish item. So pretty much the same code. We just put them into a controller method to be able to do the retrieval. So we just repurposed the code in this case. We did not really rewrite any code. We just kind of lifted and shifted of sorts. So let's add the routes real quick. And then we will go ahead, build and deploy this and make sure our buttons are functioning. Okay, so now that we have the routes, or I should say the shrouts, done, we're going to go ahead and build and deploy. Everything out. We also did a couple of fixes, which I'll disclose right after. And as we click, you can see our buttons are here. So now if we publish the item, it gives us our alert, closes the dialog as in our script. And then for the view target item, it actually opens up a new tab and goes directly to that item in the web database, right through the content editor. So those buttons are wired up. So what did I have to fix after I did the copy and deploy and found issues? We forgot the view target item function. So essentially this is going out to get that target DB, and it's just really doing a redirect. It's also checking to make sure that, if you can do this basically from opening a window standpoint, make sure that pop-ups are allowed. You really don't need it. It should be opening up a new tab, but, got to make sure. So that is that for the script. We did make some layout changes. We forgot the tools text, the header, when we originally did this. So added that in, tied it back to the definition that we created. And then I changed the definition a little bit from a text type of a large value. And that was it. So we ended up with this. The next thing we'll do is we'll put validations right before this. Okay, so the first thing we'll want to do is add a validation title definition, because we actually saw that validation title on the original one. Okay, and we'll put this as a large value and put in the word validation. So then we'll go to the layout, and we're going to add two things. First, we're going to add that text rendering. And then we'll attach that to the data source we just created for the And the last thing we want to do is add a border. As we know, the border acts as a div. So we want a container basically to put the results of our validation in. And we'll just call that validation. Make sure those are in the right column. Okay, now we do need to do the code and actually activate the validation. That's going to activate all the validations. And then let's add our controller code. We'll do the route. And we'll do the script. Okay, so a lot of copy and pasting. This is basically, again, right from, the old component, creating the unordered list, the list items, make with validation pass for getting the translation of what that key is, putting it in a single list item, adding our route, and then adding the JavaScript to pull the query string, pass it along to validate item, and then error or success, we're going to fill that validation div with whatever information comes back. So we will go ahead and build this and display. Okay, so let's take a look. We've deployed everything. We had one minor change that we had to fix. And as you can see, as it pulls up, all the validations have shown to pass. So that is populating and filling up that border, aka div tag. So that pretty much concludes that. The thing that we were missing is essentially this validation. So we wanted to kick off the validation on initialize to validate the item. That we didn't do before, so it didn't fire right away, and that was the only issue. So with that, we are going to jump over and take a look at a finished solution and kind of walk through the code of the grid. From this row drop downs, this is where we take care of the two drop downs that you saw on the original screen, and we'll look at the new product in a little bit. So those were the author versions and the publishing targets in a drop down. So essentially we did the same thing. We put in a row panel, a couple of column panels. We did put in a border to kind of get those things centered a little bit and aligned properly between the two. So both the columns are actually within a border. And we'll look at that in a little bit. The item versions DB and the publishing target DB is actually custom control. It started out to be a data source and a combo box, a speak combo box. I had some troubles with the speak combo box. I'm still putting that together for Sitecore support at the time of this recording. So it's being worked on, but essentially I couldn't listen for or I couldn't catch the selected item event. And so therefore I never know when it triggered to automatically refresh the grid. So I just wrapped my own, captured that event and force the refresh, actually force the page post back. And the item compare is the grid. And we're going to go through this code a little bit as well. But that's really the last of what that component is. So the hacks that I had to do to get around the drop downs weren't that bad. So you can see this is pretty much the same type of setup. Again, going to get item versions to populate this. Nothing really out of the ordinary of what we've done before. What I had to do is essentially inject some script into the CSHTML, which is ugly and I hated to do, but it got me through the problem for showing you guys this. So we're essentially binding the options And on a change, we want to change the version change this, which calls this function right down here, changes the query string, properly propagates that VS for the version, and then we just basically change the href back to that and it refreshes. The publishing target's exactly the same. So we're going through that as well. And then we come to the custom diff viewer. Now this was really an XML sheer application. And we kept most of it. So you see the original compare, the compare that's looking for the parent control. It's basically using sections and grid panels and populating that. And that still exists because it actually goes through that and uses that for the comparison for validation. So what I did is just create another for compare HTML, and we're just returning the HTML string. So exactly the same thing, except for instead of the section, we're doing a generic control. And we are setting styles directly for open and close to support the JavaScript for that. Now, the reason we're doing this, the sections before would collapse and open, the accordions. But however, they are reliant on different libraries of JavaScript to function. As they are more sheer and they're looking at SC form. So we needed to cut that dependency for these. And quite honestly, like I said, I had not used the repeater. This is the perfect place to use that repeater to build. For the sake of time and for the demo, we went this route where we kept most of the same code base. And I just injected what we needed to inject to be able to get the functionality of the accordion in. So that's really the only difference here. Definitely, we should look at that repeater for this, but everything else is pretty much the same. It's building it up. The only thing different is we're rendering that control to a writer, which is tied to a string builder, and we're just returning that HTML string for that rendering. So when it comes back, it's actually coming back in the item compare control, which it's just basically a div tag. And there's also injected script here to be able to do the accordion between the open and close on the click of that attribute, that div tag with the anchor. So seeing it all together, let's take a look. So this is a different instance. Again, I was hungry when I created these, so this one's called Graham Elliott. And so basically we see the item exists, validation is good. We go look at the item comparer and we get that screen, which we'll cut out of the video. So here's the finished product. We see that we have author versions 1 and 2. We can select 1. We get a post back. Now, obviously, we don't have 1 here. That's why we're seeing the name. But you can see that the differences are highlighted. We only have 1 publishing target. And the full grid is there. We can close that dialog. We could view the target item. That opens up in a new tab. We can publish the item. And then off the ribbon as well, we can look at the target database. Now you saw another dialog flash up, but essentially it opens up this, much like the other button, it opens it up in another tab. And it just lets us know, hey, the item in the target database has been opened in a new window. In this case, a tab. That is really the control overall. So, we took a 6.5 control. We made modifications. Most of the code base, as you saw, was the same. We just kind of shuffled it around a little bit. We could have probably did a little bit more shuffling around and organizing. However, the code base pretty much the same. We changed basically that look and feel of it from a tech stack standpoint and to speak from sheer UI. And now we have a sheer UI control that works great in 8. So that's it. And if there's any questions, you can reach me at msurvey via Twitter. You can leave a note for us at sitecoreexperienced@gmail.com. And I'm more than happy to answer questions. This is really a rough video overview. So thank you.